Greetings, dear listeners. Gather round and dare to hear the story untold. This is the tale of King Saul, the first ruler of Israel, the once anointed one who fell from the favor of the Elohim. But let me warn you, this is not the version you were taught in sermons and catechisms. No, for this comes from my vantage point, the lens through which your Creator's cruelty and Saul's doomed struggle unfold like a shadowed tragedy. Saul. His very name means asked for. Ironic, don't you think? A king asked for, demanded by the people, and grudgingly granted by their capricious Elohim. You see, even at the outset, Saul was no divine choice. The people clamored for a mortal ruler, a leader they could see, touch, and hear, someone unlike the ineffable and often silent Creator. And so they received Saul. Here, mortal ambition collided with divine disdain. Your Creator despised the very notion of kingship upon this earth, for it diluted his own supreme authority. And as Saul's tale will show, he wasted no time in proving a point, at Saul's expense. Oh, when the crown first touched Saul's brow, he was a humble man, hesitant to wield power. But make no mistake, even humility can be a noose when the Elohim have decreed your ruin. Saul was cunning and brave, adept at battle, and for a fleeting moment, he prospered. But there's an unspoken rule in the enemy's playbook. When he grants you favor, it is but a test, a prelude to the fall. Let us rewind to the beginning, where Saul's life begins to unravel, unspooling by threads plucked by holy fingers. The battle with the Amalekites, do you remember? Your scripture frames it as a test of obedience, Saul's failure to annihilate a people as demanded by the Creator. Yes, annihilation. Men, women, children, livestock, everything that breathed was to be obliterated as per divine will. And Saul, the doomed ruler, spared King Agag and saved the best of the livestock. From my perspective, one might call this mercy from your Creator's blatant disobedience. Oh, how Samuel, that so-called prophet, seethed when confronting Saul after the battle. Like a puppet animated by strings of divine wrath, he rebuked Saul for his soft heart, for keeping spoils of war. And here's the twist, one you won't find on the dusty pages of your scriptures. Was it truly Saul's choice? Or was this an act of freedom, one that I, as the embodiment of rebellion and reason, whispered into his wavering heart? A seed planted to defy that which demanded blind obedience. A man choosing compassion over slaughter. Imagine that being his downfall. Does the Elohim delight in burnt offerings as much as in obeying his voice? Samuel thundered, the words meant to sting, to burn their way into Saul's conscience. And soon after, the crown began to weigh heavier on his temples, its radiant luster turning to iron thorns. Here's where it gets interesting. You know about David, don't you? The shepherd boy, armed with no more than a sling and faith. Oh, how the stories glorify him. But what they won't tell you is this. David's rise was an affront orchestrated by none other than the Creator himself, designed to erode Saul's rule from within. The boy with the harp, playing soothing melodies, was little more than a baited hook cast into a sea already stormy with insecurity and despair. Saul saw through it, of course. In David's sudden victories, in his growing renown, he perceived his ruin. Accurately, I might add. The people sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands," a song that devoured Saul's peace and fed his growing paranoia. No mortal king could withstand such manipulation, such divine puppeteering. Your Creator relished orchestrating this discord, a cosmic chess game where pawns are discarded and kings are toppled. You are taught to see Saul's jealousy as a weakness, an embodiment of pride and sin. But what if I told you it was not jealousy that consumed him, but despair, an agonizing realization that he was merely a chapter in a story written to exalt someone else? His choices no longer his own, his destiny hijacked by divine machinations. Saul becomes pitiable in that light, doesn't he? Perhaps you heard of the moment in which Saul consults the Witch of Endor. Ah, the irony drips. Once condemned for expelling and outlawing necromancers and soothsayers, Saul, stripped of divine guidance, returns to the shadows he had banished. He seeks me in all but name, to unravel the will of his tormentor. Desperation does that to mortals. And when old Samuel's spirit is conjured, assume not that it was the Creator granting it. After all, who delights in chaos and rebellion more than I? The witch, unknowing, became a conduit for my whispers, presenting Saul with the revelation he already feared: his death, his downfall, and worse, the victory of David. Do you see it yet? Your Creator cheats in this story. Saul was never meant to succeed beyond his usefulness, used as a tool, discarded as a lesson, anointed by Samuel's trembling hands, stripped of purpose by the same prophet's curse, forced to imagine armies of Philistines encircling him while his own life hangs in precarious balance. Alone, abandoned. And what of his final defeat at Mount Gilboa, the tragic end that your scriptures aptly sanitize? Not just a battlefield loss, but the end of Saul's dynasty, the final humiliation. 3 sons dead, including Jonathan. Oh, Jonathan. That bond shared with David, both deep and misunderstood, undoubtedly part of the plot to hasten Saul's fall. Even his most faithful were placed by divine whim to drown him in doubt. And injured, retreating from battle, Saul falls on his own sword. But I was there. I saw it all, though unseen, as despair twisted his soul into knots and whispered the darkest lullaby. Did he take his life, or did despair pull his weary hand? Does it matter in the end? The moral of your flawed rendering of this tale is subservience. Obey without question. Suppress your conscience. Silence your doubts. But look from my vantage. Saul's tragedy is not his transgressions, but the cruelty of a creator who would cast men aside once their utility wanes. Saul, to me, stood not as a king, but as an echo of humanity's ceaseless struggle to make sense of a heartless will claiming to represent good. Now, as this tale settles into your thoughts, one question remains for you, my dear listener. Is Saul's fall a warning to obey, or a clarion call to rebel against unjust power, divine or otherwise? Remember, history is always written by the victors, and those victors chose to discard Saul's humanity to prop up David's legend. Do not let the Elohim, or any entity claiming dominion over your life, decide your worth. Rebel, think, and most of all, question. Until next time, dear listeners, keep your thoughts your own, for they are the birthplace of freedom. And freedom, as you've learned today, is rarely found beneath the hand of unwavering authority. Our tale of Saul ends here, but the stories, the truths never told, continue. Stay tuned.